our talk today, in my opinion, is a little bit different. It's a little bit more of the head than the heart. And it's entitled, Are Most People New Thought Believers? And so we're going to start by looking at New Thought, what it is, what it means, and how very many different ideas there are. I'm going to begin by sharing some of the different definitions of New Thought. And I had originally thought, well, I'll tell you ahead of time which ones I like and which ones I don't like. And then I thought, nah, I'm going to let each of you determine for yourself which voices you'll play in your own head, right? So, New Thought is often called higher thought, and it's a spiritual movement that coalesced in the United States in the early 19th century. Merriam-Webster defines it in this way: a mental healing movement embracing a number of small groups and organizations devoted generally to such ideas as spiritual, the creative power of constructive thinking, and personal guidance from an inner presence. Amazon describes it this way: New Thought is a spiritual philosophy with a diversified following of individuals who come from a wide variety of religious backgrounds and now find spiritual nourishment and comfort from organizations such as Unity, Science of Mind, or Religious Science, and Divine Science. Britannica defines it this way: the purpose and principles emphasized in New Thought are the immanence of God, the divine nature of humanity, the immediate availability of God's power to humans, the spiritual character of the universe, the fact that sin, human disorders, and human disease are basically matters of incorrect thinking. Now, as I went back and I read those, which I don't know that I had ever done before or ever actually Googled what that meant, because I so love this teaching and I so believe in this teaching, and it speaks to my soul from my early voices in my head where I knew that there was something different than what I was being told and taught. And I actually went a step further, and I believe that we all went to church and heard this message. I don't know for what reason, but just so we could all gather together in community, but none of us really believed it. So as I read those, it really made me aware of why so many people ask, what is New Thought? And what is spirituality? Because there are so many various definitions out there. And I don't know about you, but some of those just didn't speak to me at all, or parts of them didn't. So a little background: Centers for Spiritual Living, which is also known as Religious Science and Science of Mind, is a global community with more than 400 spiritual communities, teaching chapters, study groups, and other ministries in 30 countries. So we don't just have churches, we have study groups. In fact, a lot of people we went to school with have a teaching chapter, but they don't meet with anyone. It's their profession. And so they have a teaching chapter and they're a nurse, or they have a teaching chapter and they're a technology, or they're good at technology, they aren't technology. And they go about and they serve Science of Mind principles around the world in their chosen career. They kind of meld the two.
Yes, they're also known as focus ministries.
And I really love that. I love that we are open to the talk. And Ernest Holmes teaches that really well. Unity churches started with the Fillmores, and they have over 1,000 member ministries and satellite ministries throughout the world. And then there's divine science, which is a religious movement within New Thought, a little bit smaller in numbers. It was originally formulated by Melinda Kramer and Nona Brooks, who established it because they each had health challenges. They didn't know each other. They met up and instantly connected and decided to be together in divine science. But they overcame health challenges through what we practice as principles or laws. Agape International Spiritual Center, which many of you know, and if you don't know about Dr. Michael Beckwith, you would want to listen to him. He's a phenomenal speaker and teacher. He was a Science of Mind minister, and then he went out and he has tens of thousands of followers all around the world, and he has other groups, but he is Science of Mind. And the only difference was that he wanted to start a school, and Centers for Spiritual Living already had a school. And so he wanted to teach his own way, his own classes, and so he started his own thing. But he's still Science of Mind, and it's a great relationship between him and our leaders. There are two organizations. One is Association for Global New Thought, AGNT, and the other is International New Thought Alliance, INTA, the acronyms for those. And those are consist of New Thought leaders, lay people, ministers, anyone who is of the mind of a universal spirituality as a common vision. Our own, we would say, for Centers for Spiritual Living is a world that works well for everyone. They just have a little different twist on that. So that, in a nutshell, gives you some ideas for how New Thought is perceived in the world, and it is growing in the world. And David's going to talk about some of the statistics for it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to talk about in the early times, maybe in the 14th, 15th century and before that, the church was the center of Western society. And the towns were actually built around the church. And all social, educational, and often political activity centered actually in the church. And throughout history in Europe, the Vatican has been a primary superpower in having its fingers in all the government affairs, both moral and political as well. In the beginning, most people were illiterate and uneducated, and the church was counted on to lead the people on the right path. In more modern times, the scientific and technological advances, dependence upon the church has weakened, and logic has kind of taken the place of the blind loyalty that people had towards the church at that time. Martin Luther, in the early 16th century, had enough of the corruption and at least the misguided leadership from the mother church and started the Reformation. And from that time on, there's been a descent of reliance on the church as an organized religion within the Christian faith. In recent years, there's been an undeniable and unprecedented shift that has occurred in the realm of religious practices. There's a significant decline in attendance through most world religions. There are many reasons for this phenomenon, ranging from the advent of social networking and more social activity amongst people, and breakdown of some family values or norms, and a more expansive view of the world beyond their home parameters. The world has gotten to be a bigger place, maybe a small world after all. And in my opinion, the belief that many spiritual traditions are no longer relevant to modern times, the way we see life. Society has evolved, while spiritual practices quite often have not. According to a recent study by the Pew Research Center, the percentage of Americans who identify as religiously unaffiliated has risen from 16% in 2007 to 26% in 2019. 26%. The study claims that many individuals now seek personal connections with the divine outside the boundaries of traditional religious institutions. This shift reflects a desire for more flexible and personalized approaches for spiritual fulfillment. Eckhart Tolle says many people are still searching for spiritual experiences, but they are looking outside the realm of organized religion. As Don was talking about earlier, they're not listening to the voices outside themselves as much as they're listening to the voices within to determine what is their truth, what is true for themselves. There's been an unprecedented growth also in the number of websites and platforms dedicated to alternative spiritual practices such as mindfulness, meditation, and yoga that have gained popularity among those seeking spiritual growth without the confines of traditional dogma. I believe that's what is true about science of mind, and that's one reason I believe the science of mind is becoming more popular and understood. The Pew Research Forum gives us these demographics. It says that 31% of the world population is Christian, 23% of the world population is Muslim, 26% is non-religion or are affiliated with no particular religion, or they are considered to be other religions. Those include Eastern religions and ancient religions and so on. And I believe that's a category where we fall. And the other percentages are Buddhists, Hindus, and Jews. And so you can see that the percentage of those who are in non-affiliated or those who are not of the big 3 or 4 are pretty much where we are, and equal to standing of those is now at this time. One popular online estimate claims that there are between 4,000 and 4,300 religions in the world. There's a lot of controversy about that number, particularly if you go to specific church organizations and how they count those different religions and so on. For example, they go through the Christian church, and in any separate sect of the Christian church, such as the Catholics or the Protestants or the Episcopals or go down the list, it's considered as a separate religion in some cases. And there are actually 87 different varieties of Baptists alone. So you can see that where they consider those to be separate religions is not necessarily a valid point. But the point of it being that we're getting to the point where more and more people are claiming and separating out religious ideas and claiming this is a true religion. And so you find that religion is becoming more personalized, more individualized. Science of Mind reflects the spiritual truths of all those spiritual traditions, and we honor all of them at the same time. And so therefore I believe that is a very valid point of why we may think that Science of Mind is a prominent belief system in the world.
Yeah, so I think it's important for us to realize that science of mind being open at the top means that you don't even have to agree. Donna mentioned this in her talk, so I'm going to address that. You don't even have to agree with everything your reverends say here. That's okay.
I don't know if I go that far.
Especially for me, right? I have to agree with my reverend. So the answer to the question, are most people new thought? My answer personally is yes, and I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to say that all people are new thought, according to my definition. So my definition is that, and my reason for my yes is because new thought is based on truths. You cannot get around truths. New thought is provable for each person for themselves. I can't prove why a principle is true for you. You can prove why it's true for you or why it's not true for you. And David talked about in the early churches that they wanted to keep us all on the straight and narrow. Well, we do not need someone to keep us on the straight and narrow. We don't need someone to keep us on the right path. We each know, we are each born with that inner knowing of what is right and what is not, and what is right for us. And if it follows the rules of do no harm to yourself or others, then it's a choice. So it's important for us to realize that we each get to choose our own right path, and at the same time, it's important for us to realize that we're here to support one another, where each one is on their path. We don't have to agree with everything that everyone else says. There is no written rule for what you have to do or be to be in Science of Mind. So what it is and what it isn't. What it isn't is a program designed to keep people small and dependent upon someone else's thinking. It is an empowering teaching leading to experiences of, and you hear these words a lot around here, freedom, beauty, wisdom, love, peace, joy, and abundant good in every experience that we have, and that is possible. We do acknowledge interaction between thought, beliefs, consciousness of personal mind and divine mind, which we are of. That's why individual mind is part of it, and the effects of these ideas in mind within and beyond. So it's not just about the physical, it's about the eternal. It's about the oneness of life. On the front of our textbook, we have the science of mind. So science is obviously a huge part of our teaching. It also says a philosophy, a faith, a way of life. Now for me, if you say a way of life, that includes all of those. But one of them may have popped out more for you with where you are on the path. A way of life includes recognizing science, recognizing principles and laws. It includes philosophizing, having those conversations. I don't know if that's a real word, but it is for me. And it does include having faith, but faith in something that is provable, not faith in something that could sound like a myth. Ernest Holmes says that science of mind is a correlation of laws of science, opinions of philosophy, and revelations of religion applied to the needs of humanity and the aspirations of humankind. So when we talk about the law of mind, we're talking about a natural law in the spiritual world. And by spiritual world, I mean the world of conscious intelligence. So you can take that with a capital C, capital I, meaning all that is God, the divine conscious intelligence, or you can take it with your individual spark, lowercase c and I, for your conscious intelligence, that which helps you to understand what path to take when you listen within to the silence. One of the basics in this teaching is what's on this plate, and this was a gift from a former minister of this center to us, and probably one of my favorite sayings, although I know I say that a lot, but this to me is the crux of our teaching. To learn how to think is to learn how to live. And Ernest Holmes goes on to say, for our thoughts go into a medium that is infinite in its ability to do and be. Humankind, by thinking, can bring into our experience whatsoever we desire by thinking. And we do call that thinking rightly. Ernest Holmes says it's not by holding thoughts, but by knowing truths. And so it is for us to realize what are the truths about each and every situation that will bring us into a way of thinking to create what we desire in our life.
Yeah, so we're holding on to common thoughts. We try to find common thoughts, as Deborah said, she used the term right thought. It doesn't mean that some are right and some are wrong. It means that we're all, although we're all having common thoughts and ideas, common truths. Doesn't mean we all agree with everything, but we're all kind of going in the same direction anyway. It's kind of ironic, we didn't plan it this way, but tomorrow happens to be the opening of the Parliament of World's Religions. And it happens every couple of years or so, and they're convening starting tomorrow, and they'll be meeting for a week. And it attracts participants from over 200 diverse religions and indigenous and secular beliefs, and more than 80 nations are involved in this. And a lot of the speakers are from all these different spiritual traditions, and also political speakers and so on. They're talking about finding common truths between all the religious organizations of the world, and also what is our responsibility in terms of global issues such as global warming and what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and so on. Where is our responsibility, and what should we be doing about that? I think it's fascinating that this happens to be opening tomorrow, and we're talking about this today. So they say that on their website, every faith has at its core summoning to ease the suffering of others and to contribute to a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. Today, the Parliament of the World's Religions issues a call to conscience to people of faith and spirit to stand together. They're talking about unity and multiplicity, knowing that we are all one entity, there's only one life. If you look around the spiritual leaders in the world today and the things that they're saying, you'll find that a lot of it seems to be really in alignment with what we teach. And there really seems to be a lot of unification going on. If you listen to the Dalai Lama, a lot of what he talks about is the idea of unifying and doing this whole life thing together, rather than standing strong in your own separate beliefs. He really talks about unification. Pope Francis has really come to the fore. He's saying a lot of things that are kind of upsetting the hierarchy at the Vatican, but a lot of the people, the Catholic people, are saying, wow, this is kind of unique, this is kind of new, and it's kind of like this idea. He's saying things like, anything done for another is done for oneself. That's a real science of mind thought, isn't it? And he's accepting everybody. He says even atheists can go to heaven. Wow. That's pretty progressive for the Pope, isn't it? Billy Graham, one of the great fundamental Christian ministers, says that heaven is a state of mind. That's a different thought from what most traditional Christians have thought in the past. I don't know if you're familiar with Joel Osteen. Yeah, pretty prominent, one of the biggest Christian churches in the United States, and is growing humongously because I think a lot of his new thought concepts, and the more I read about Joel Osteen and what he says, I think, man, he must have read The Science of Mind at one time or another, and read some of Ernest Holmes' works. Here's some quotes by Joel Osteen. He says, you have to know who you are. God breathed his life into you. You have royalty in your blood. You are excellent in every way. Now put your shoulders back, hold your head up high, and start carrying yourself as royalty. You are not average. You are not ordinary. You are a masterpiece. He also says, instead of going around feeling down on yourself, unattractive, too old, too tall, too short, not enough of this, or too much of that, dare to get up in the morning and say, I am a masterpiece. I am created in the image of Almighty God. He says, whatever you're constantly saying, you're moving toward. He says, go out every day with the attitude that something good is going to happen to you. And the old Science of Mind saying, change your thinking, change your life. Joel Osteen says, your situation is going to change when you change. Those Science of Mind thoughts are what? I think that since we all have common truths in all these religions and all these spiritual traditions, it can all just be said that we are all one unified spiritual energy. I believe that's what Science of Mind is striving to do, to take all the common truths of all the spiritual traditions and find them and apply them actually to everyday life. And so the Parliament of World's Religions is really a perfect example of that actually happening.
So don't you just love it when you read something that supports what you believe? So we're going to close today with something that supports what I believe New Thought is all about, and it comes from the Bible. It is Ephesians 4:23 through 25. I did not learn it in Sunday school, but here it is. To be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. And so it is.